بهرامی افشاری احمد کسایی که غایبن رو من میگم، الان من حاضرها رو نوشتم، غایبا رو میگم اگر که از قلم افتاده بگن که حاضر. من کسایی که غایبن رو میگم، اکبری غایبه، بهبودی غایبه، علیمی غایبه، حیدری هم غایبه. با من که فایده نداره که، نمیشه که مثلا یکی بگی با منه، خودش باید وارد سیستم بشه. عبدالناصر حیدری آمد. بعد حالا حاضر ده ضیایی غایبه، الان ضیایی یا غایب داریم ما. عبدالنوری غایبه، محجوب یا محجوب غایبه، منیب غایبه، میرویس نجم میرویس غایبه، اجمل وسیق با حاضره، نه حاضر. ترکزاده هم غایبه، ترکزاده هم غایبه. نه ما نگفتیم شما رو نخوندیم، شما یعنی حاضری، اگه نخوندیم یعنی شما حاضری. علیزاده حاضره، احمد منیب، وزیر احمد منیب خیلی این حاضر دادن. هر دو علیزاده رو من حاضر دادم، سعید احمد و وحید احمد، هر دو تا حاضر دادم. بعد پس این از بزرگوارمون. حالا ادامه میدیم بحث رو، ببینیم شاید دیگه باز بهتر. I once worked on a project for a school superintendent who only wanted to receive updates through text message. He would never read emails, and all calls went straight to voicemail. But which stakeholder was the school superintendent? The how was the text message. The what was project updates in 160 characters or less. And the when was Friday after 4. اینو بهش میگن ترانزکشن پلنینگ، یعنی قطعات کوچیک اطلاعات که لازمه برای افراد ارسال کنیم. هر تیکه اطلاعاتی که برای افراد میفرستیم با این مشخصات که اینجا الان نوشته بهش میگیم یک ترانزکشن، یک جزء کوچیکی از اطلاعات. اینا رو ما بایستی برنامه‌ریزی داشته باشیم. You should use and update your stakeholder communication plan throughout your process. این شد از مفاهیم. باز در ادامه به اینا توجه داشته باشیم. There's no joke about how we communicate. A man was driving down a country road. When he rounded the corner, he saw a woman driving a red convertible. She was talking on the phone and zigzagging in and out of her lane. When she turned the corner, she quickly swerved into the man's lane. As she passed, she screamed, "Pig!" He turned and yelled, "Learn to drive!" But when he turned back, he ran straight into the pig. At a basic level, when we communicate, we're doing two things. We're encoding a message and sending it to the receiver. Then the receiver is decoding the message to understand it. We can do this through language, writing. این میگه که اطلاعات از فرستنده به گیرنده
ممکنه این وسط یک حلقه‌ای باشه که اون چیزی که فرستنده میفرسته رو گیرنده متوجه نشه. این وسط یک حلقه‌ای هست که این ارتباط رو برقرار کنه.
After you encode a message, you lose some of its clarity. Added messiness is called noise. So let's go back to our case. When the woman rounded the corner, she yelled out a commonly used word. Used language to encode the message and delivered it to the other driver. As soon as she finished yelling, her message picked up noise. Why was she yelling? Was she upset? What was she doing when she yelled? Where was she? Was she on a farm? Does the word have more than one meaning? As a project manager, all the messages that you send and receive at least have some noise. You just need to make sure that the messages aren't drowned out by the noise. When the noise is louder than the message, you're in real danger of being misunderstood. You can tell if there's a lot of risk or noise by looking at the message's content, circumstances, and content. Sometimes the content will have a lot of noise. The content are usually the words written or spoken. It can be used commonly used gestures like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and sometimes the content already has noise built in. I once worked for an organization that loved acronyms. They would say things like, make sure the BRD has the latest CRs for our CRP. Check the rate sheet to find the smooth. It took me months to understand the content, the message through all this noise. Sometimes the content of a gesture has a lot of noise. In some cultures, when you use your hand to call someone over like this, it's considered offensive. Even the commonly used thumbs up has a different meaning depending on the nationality. But take a look at the message's content. Is it filled with a lot of acronyms or industry-specific language? Is your company internationalized? If so, you need to be very aware of the content's language and cultural differences. The circumstances will also add noise to the message. The circumstances are what you are doing when you receive the message. Say at the end of a 2-hour meeting, someone says, well, that was a great use of our time. The circumstances would suggest that this was sarcasm. If someone said the same sentence at the end of a 30-minute seminar, you might accept the message as genuine. How to look at the circumstances of the messages you receive. Is it the last few days of the quarter? Did the company just post disappointing returns? All of these circumstances will impact the noise level of the message. After a disappointing quarter, you wouldn't want to send an email message with a subject that says, reducing team inefficiency. People will assume they're about to lose their job. Under those circumstances, you want to email the subject that says, making sure everyone's working well together. Under different circumstances, both those email subjects would be fine, but after a disappointing quarter, there'd be a lot of extra noise in the first message. Finally, the context will add a lot of noise. The context is where you are when you receive the message. Say that you're in a meeting and a stranger in the suit says, you did a great job. You'll probably react differently than if you're at a grocery store and a stranger tells you the same thing. Context will give you a lot of background information about what the other person is trying to communicate. Same message in a different context will mean different things. Our poor pig may have survived if the content, circumstances, or context had a little less of this noise. Maybe if the content was, watch out for the pig, the outcome would have been different. Watch for this when you try to determine how much noise you're getting with your message. Don't assume that the communication is clean, and you'll have a better chance of understanding the other person. A few years ago, an Italian cargo ship called the Monte Cristo was captured by pirates. The crew was shuffled to the bottom of the ship, and the pirates seized control. The crew wrote the pirate's location on a small piece of paper and stuffed it in a bottle. They put a light on the bottle and tossed it overboard. The NATO ships retrieved the bottle, they read the note, and knew that the crew was safe, so they focused on taking the ship. The pirates gave up, and no one was hurt. One-way communication saved the day. The project will probably not have pirates, but certain to have one-way communication. In fact, almost all of your communication is one-way communication. One-way communication is the information that is pushed by someone or pulled from someone else. A good example of one-way communication is email. It's a message pushed from someone into your inbox. Project managers are working.
از مشکلات ارتباطات صحبت می‌کرد که اون هر حرفی در یک کانتکست معنی ثابتی داره. حالا انواع ارتباطات و یک موقع از ارتباط یک طرفه، شما یک ایمیل میزنید یک چیزی رو می‌نویسید، به این میگن ارتباط یک طرفه.
In a golden age of one-way communication. Think of all the email, reports, and memos. And think of all the websites. It might seem like you spend your entire day consuming one-way communication. Another example of one-way communication is a website. Pull the information from someone who posted to a web server. A website is the most common, but information can come from many different sources. If you're reading a road sign, then you're pulling a message from the sign. One-way communication has become so prevalent that many project managers forget about its disadvantages. You should think of email or website not that much different from throwing a bottle into the briny sea. One-way know what they don't understand. So misinformation can creep in without anyone knowing. There's also limited ways to check that your message was read. This was a big problem with the crew of Monte Cristo. They never knew if their message was read or still just floating in the sea. This makes one-way communication pretty limited. So be sure to mostly use one-way communication for notice. You are notifying someone that something has happened. Email is perfect for notification like functional review board meeting canceled. It would be risky for a message like your performance at the presentation. The first message is noticed and unlikely to be misinterpreted. The other is likely to have emotional value. As a project manager, you should always follow up any questions from a one-way message with a two-way conversation. If there's a question, it usually means that your message wasn't really a notification. It's likely to be misunderstood. For one-way communication that you pull from somewhere else, you should limit the message to reporting. Report should be a simple summary of what you know. The language should be clear. A good report is like a billboard. You should even think of reports and memos as one big billboard. Imagine a billboard that says, if you find that your need for gasoline from the automobile you're driving, you should be proactive and start to move towards the right. This will give you the opportunity to exit and purchase gasoline from our facility located proximate to the exit. So that's how a lot of reports are written. Clear language, and you'll have an easier time communicating a message. Your report should use language like, the team will complete the document for the screen design on October 20th. You should avoid language like, given what the team knows now, after we receive the information from other departments, we will expect a complete draft of the design at the end of this quarter. Wordy answers with your confusion and are likely to be misread. For all one-way communication, you should only create low-emotion messages. Emotions are almost impossible to interpret through one-way messages. Think about how often you've read an email and sounded sad or angry. Then you later talk to the person and they said they were tired or in a rush. Behavior scientists tell us that we think we understand emotions best, but in reality, most of us depend on tone and facial expressions to help us interpret these sentences. So think about how facial expressions and tone of voice can take a simple statement like, I don't understand what you mean. It sounds inquisitive. If I say it this way, I don't understand what you mean. It sounds angry and defensive. This is a simple six-word sentence. If this were an email, there might be several areas in this communication. We are also not very good at writing emotion. Most emotion we want to communicate is lost in email, reports, and memos. If you want to communicate frustration or empathy, it's often lost in the message. Even when the emotion is found, it's often misunderstood. If you want to send a one-way message, you should understand what works best. If your message is high in emotion or unclear, then use two-way communication. If it's simple and mundane, then just use email or report. At the end of the 19th century, the telephone was invented and it changed the world. Previously, people used a telegraph to transmit speech that would create written letters. The telegraph was limited to just one-way communication. The new telephone was a marvel of two-way communication. Telegraph existed for decades. What the telephone gave you was the power of two-way communication with the long-distance reach of the telegraph. This simple ability to transmit back and forth increased what each person could communicate. This shift started a whole new era of communication. Two-way communication is one of the most powerful tools you have as a project manager. You need to nurture two-way communication. It should be your go-to method for all.
قسمت‌ها داره در رابطه با ارتباط دو طرفه و یک طرفه من و اینکه مزیت داره ارتباط این طرف برای
all important communication. You understand the power of two-way communication, you'll start to rely on it more and more in your process. Two-way communication is a conversation. This conversation can be in person, over the phone, through video, or even through instant messaging. The conversation should go from sender to receiver and back again. An important part of two-way communication is this back and forth. There should be a rhythm to two-way communication. A message goes out, it's heard by the audience, and the person has an opportunity to ask questions. The best form of two-way communication is face-to-face two-way communication. With a face-to-face conversation, you can advantage of visual cues, gestures, and body language. These cues will tell you when someone has a question before they ask. I once worked for an organization that encouraged two-way communication. Co-workers were located throughout the building. Very few of the cubicles had names on them. The meeting rooms were booked months in advance. So this organization had trouble completing their project. The projects were swamped with email messages and replies. Everyone spent a good part of the day just trying to find out answers to basic questions. So you should think of two-way communication as an investment in the project. You'll spend more time at the beginning clearing up questions, then you can follow up later using one-way communication or updates and notice. Two-way communication is less prone to the miscommunication that can plague one-way messages. Audience can quickly clear confusion. It's almost always the more reliable way to get good information. But it's a lot more difficult to organize. You can fire off a one-way email to half a dozen people in 5 minutes. If you want to see two-way communication, you have to visit each person individually or gather them all in one place. One-way communication also takes a lot less effort and a lot less time, so it's much more widely used. Many organizations encourage one-way communication over two-way. But one-way communication is always informative. You want to use two-way communication to explain something so that people can answer questions. You also want to use two-way communication for high emotion messages. You'll get the most value from two-way communication if you follow some simple practice. If you have meetings in your office, try to remove as many obstacles as you can when having a conversation. You should also focus on listening. Finally, make sure that you don't multitask when using two-way communication. You can enhance your two-way communication by being aware of physical obstacles. If you have an office, don't keep a chair on the other side of your desk. Instead, place the chairs on the opposite corner of your office. You might not realize that your desk is a communication barrier between you and your audience. A physical barrier can quickly become an emotional barrier. Instead, get up from your desk and sit right next to the other person. When you're using two-way communication, be sure to make the distinction between what you want to hear and what you're actually hearing. Everyone's tendency is to accept good news and be more skeptical of bad news. Finally, don't multitask when using two-way communication. If you're talking with someone, do not simultaneously check your email on your phone. It usually means you're either not listening or not reading. Most people are much worse at multitasking than they know. They assume their time is like a pizza that can be divided out one slice at a time. In reality,
درسته. الان مشهد یه بارندگی شروع شده، هوا ابریه، به خاطر همین اینترنت یک مقدار دچار مشکله. از اون طرف قضیه هم که اینم فیلمه و شما حالا میدونم تو هرات کابل چجوریه وضعیت آب و هوا. الان مشهد امروز نبود، صبح آفتابی بود، الان هوا ابری شده و یک مقداری پرش داره. خب ما تا همین جا این جلسه رو کافیه، چون مطلب اون نقاط جلسه آینده بهتر انشاءالله بشه و بشه اداره. اسامیتون رو من نوشتم، حضور هم کردیم و یه سری مطالبی رو هم بهتون مقدماتی کنیم. انشاءالله هفته آینده دنبال میکنیم، ولی تا ساعت 4 در کلاس حضور داشته باشید. که چرا بیمارستان آقای بهبودی چیکار شده؟ آقای بیمارستان